Thanks so much to Brian for getting me here. It was nice of him to do that, and I do appreciate it. Like coming up here last time, I guess we talked about this was, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, it seems. Shorter than that, but you know, Greg, you know how it is. Time goes by quickly. I thought what I'd do tonight, the nice thing about not being an academic, I left the academic skin trade about trafficking trade maybe 25, yeah, it's about 25 years ago now. Bad administration and too busy playing music. But I've been doing a lot of programs since. I do, I guess, what you call public history, a lot of that stuff. Museums, historical societies, whatever, because they have more money, as I mentioned before. But I wanted to highlight some of the songs of Joe Hill tonight, so I'll try to give you a little background on those. But not too much. I don't want to turn it into a lecture, so I'll just add some commentary here and there. I don't know what everybody knows about Joe Hill. It seems like lately people are just yelling at me to play the Earl Robinson song from the 1930s, I Dreamed I Saw Joe Hill, Dreamt I Saw Joe Hill, depending on where you are, which I'm not going to play. I don't yet, you know. There's a couple songs. I don't want to say it right now. The problem with putting me in front of a microphone is I often say things that I probably shouldn't. Let me just give you a little background on Joe Hill. Born 1879 in Sweden, executed November 19th, 1915 in Salt Lake. No, he was charged with murder. They really had no evidence. He did have a gunshot wound, but there were many people that came into hospitals that night with gunshot wounds. What he did have was a card from the IWW. He'd been involved with the IWW since he came to the United States, or shortly thereafter. He came to the U.S. in 1902, and he joined the IWW not too long after its form, from what we can tell. He was a migrant worker, became radicalized, worked in New York, worked in Cleveland, worked in Chicago, ends up in the West, did cross over into Canada. He fought in the Mexican Revolution with a group of IWW members who armed themselves and went across the border. A really interesting guy, but was charged with murder. There really wasn't any evidence, but he did have an IWW card, and his songs had become somewhat well known at that point, and that made him enough of a radical to be made an example in Salt Lake. And many of you who consider yourself in the vanguard, I would challenge you to stand in front of the Mormon temple in Salt Lake today and try to avoid execution. People don't often understand what Utah's politics are all about, but I dare you to go spend several years in Utah and Idaho, and I think you'll understand exactly what I mean. So, I stay away from Utah even to this day. Nevertheless, I do want to play some of his songs. The thing about Joe Hill that's a little bit different, and then I'll shut up, is he did have a little musical training as a kid. Came from a family that I would think today we might call respectable, in the old days, respectable working class, had a good income, but then his dad was injured in an industrial railroad accident, died a few years later. The family's impoverished. All the kids have to go to work. They're all like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. He gets tuberculosis. Joe does. He has to go through treatment. Eventually his mother dies from TB in her back. And Joe decides, I'm going to the USA, you know, I'm going to see the streets that are lined with gold. Ends up here, and as I mentioned, becomes radicalized and is executed. But because he has a little musical training, I want to highlight something about him, and you'll hear it. His influences are a little different from the usual folky country. There's a little of the gospel influence, you'll hear that, because he was familiar with the Salvation Army, even back in Sweden. But a lot of stuff comes from Tin Pan Alley, music halls, vaudeville, which marks him as somewhat different from the usual folky country kind of protest singers. And I tried to bring this out on this new record that I have. I'm going to start with one, because Brian's a blues player, I promised myself I would completely rearrange this song in his honor. There was a song that was very popular about a railroad engineer named Casey Jones. You might know about him. He died with his, in the engine room, you know, the brakeman got out and all that stuff. Became kind of heroic, and there were many parodies written of this song. This one is a pro-union version, and there were some rumors that circulated that Casey Jones had been a union guy and then crossed over to the other side. It's never really been confirmed. I don't know. There's all these great stories about it, but this was a very popular song, and it was especially popular in Illinois, which doesn't surprise me because it was the railroad capital of the U.S. in the early 20th century. It's called Casey Jones, The Union Scab. Workers on the SP line to strike sound the call, but Casey Jones, the engineer, he wouldn't strike at all. His boiler, it was leaking, his drive was on the bum, and his engine and his bearings, they were all out of plumb. Casey Jones, he kept his junk pile running. Casey Jones was always working double time. Casey Jones got himself a wooden medal for being good and faithful on the SP line. The workers said to Casey, won't you help us win the strike? But Casey Jones said, let me alone, you ought to take a hike. Then Casey's wheezy engine ran right off the worn out tracks. Casey hit the river with an awful track. Casey Jones hit that river bottom. Casey Jones, he broke his bloomin' spine. Casey Jones became an Angelino. He took a trip to heaven on the SP line. Casey got to heaven right up to the pearly gates. He said, I'm Casey Jones, you know I pull the SP freight. You're just a man, said Peter, our musicians are on strike. Can get a job of scabbing anytime you like. Casey Jones got a job in heaven. Casey Jones thought he was doing mighty fine. Well, Casey Jones went scabbing on the angels, just like he did the workers on the SP line. Angels said to Peter, you know this isn't fair for Casey Jones to go around scabbing everywhere. The Angels Union 23, they sure were there, and they promptly fired Casey down that golden stair. Casey Jones went to hell a-flying. Casey Jones, the devil said, oh fine. Well, Casey Jones went scabbing on the angels, just like he did the workers on the SP line. Just like he did the workers on the SP line. Just like he did the workers on the SP line. One of the things I really admire about Joe Hill is, English wasn't his first language, and how this guy in a matter of 3 or 4 years was writing songs after he got here, and he uses a lot of hobo slangs. They're kind of like the hipster slang people of that era, and it's really, to me, it's completely remarkable the way he's able to do that. The IWW really, in American literature, probably deserves some credit for the rise of sarcasm and irony. And how he could do that, those of you who speak a second language know how hard humor is in a second language. So I'm going to play a tune that he actually wrote the original music for. Joe Hill was arrested in 1914 in Salt Lake and spent, a year in prison, maybe a little more than a year. One of the people who came to visit him was Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, who was active in the IWW at the time. And she admired Joe Hill, and Joe Hill, who had kind of watched her progress while in jail, admired her as well and really liked her. And he wrote this particular song for her, which is certainly one of my favorites. I've actually recorded this twice. Although I had a guest vocalist. A blues R&B singer sang it on this new record. Really nice version she did. It's called Rebel Girl. There are women of many descriptions in this queer world, as everyone knows. Some are living in beautiful mansions. They are wearing the finest of clothes. There are blue-blooded queens and princesses with charms made of diamonds and pearls. But the only thoroughbred lady is a rebel girl. That's a rebel girl, the rebel girl to the working class. She's a precious pearl. She brings courage, pride, and joy to the fighting rebel boy. We've had girls before, but we need some more in the industrial workers of the world. It's great to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. Yes, her hands may be hardened from labor, and her dress may not be very fine, but a heart in her bosom is beating that is true to her class and her kind. And the grafters in terror are trembling when her spite and defiance she hurls. For the only thoroughbred lady is a rebel girl. That's a rebel girl, a rebel girl to the working class. She's a precious pearl. She brings courage, pride, and joy to a fighting rebel boy. We've had girls before, but we need some more in the industrial workers of the world. It's great to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. It's great to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. It's great to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. Thank you.